Hello, everyone. Now, I know that it's hard to keep up on top of what's going on in the Holy Land, but if you want to know more about what's happening here in Israel, I'm Aaron Porras, and this is the Weekly Review. Following nearly a month of silence and speculations, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and United States President Joe Biden finally speaking on Wednesday. Biden calling Netanyahu for the first time since taking office as president in January. But while Netanyahu is the first Middle Eastern leader to receive a call from the White House, he was the 12th world leader overall. And the 4 weeks of silence leading many to wonder whether Washington was snubbing its longtime ally. So in any case, hopefully all these speculations can now be put to rest, especially as the Prime Minister's office is reporting the roughly hour-long conversation as very friendly and warm, covering a range of major topics from boosting ties to the Iran nuclear threat and the fight against coronavirus. Biden, for his part, also congratulating Netanyahu for his leadership in dealing with the pandemic. Now, speaking of Iran, United States and European leaders holding talks on Thursday in the latest efforts to revitalize the JCPOA nuclear agreement. Top diplomats from around the world collecting in Paris, both virtually and in person, to brainstorm one last-ditch effort that might bring Iran back into compliance with the 2015 JCPOA nuclear agreement. The officials from France, Germany, the UK, and the United States looking to have Tehran reverse and refrain from any steps that would impact its assurances to the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA.
Of course, we are aware of Iran's threat to cease the provisional application of its additional protocol obligations, as well as other inspections provided for under the 2015 deal, the JCPOA. This, of course, comes on top of other steps Iran has taken that go beyond what the JCPOA allows in terms of limits on its nuclear programs. The good news, of course, is that all of these steps are reversible, and the path for diplomacy remains open. And I would say that as we and our partners have underscored, Iran should reverse these steps and refrain from taking others that would impact the IAEA assurances on which not only the United States, not only our allies and partners in the region, but the entire world relies.
The Biden administration long been stating that it intends to return to the JCPOA and lift sanctions imposed on Iran as soon as Iran returns to compliance with the deal first. But Iran is still sticking to its guns too. Ayatollah Khamenei pressing Washington to lift sanctions reimposed by President Trump before Iran changes its course. And the deadline set by Tehran now just days away, after which Iran will begin limiting access for nuclear inspections.
بگم ما حرف و وعده خوب خیلی شنیدیم که در عمل اون حرفها و وعده‌ها نقض شده و ضدش عمل شده. حرف فایده نداره، وعده فایده نداره. این دفعه فقط عمل از طرف مقابل ببینیم ما هم عمل خواهیم کرد.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu flexing his political muscles on Wednesday, revealing that a complicated prisoner swap agreement has been reached with Syria and that Netanyahu's, quote, personal connections with Russia played a part. Hannah Rifkin reporting.
Secretive negotiations earlier this week, not so secret anymore. Israel and Syria agreeing to a prisoner exchange involving a young Israeli woman and 2 imprisoned Syrian residents of the Golan Heights. And the deal, brokered through Russia in a meeting lasting less than an hour, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling Army radio that he's using his personal connections with President Putin to secure the Israelis' release. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Meir Ben-Shabbat and hostage coordinator Yaron Blum leaving for Moscow on Wednesday as well. As for the prisoners' identities, various reports alleging the Israeli as a 25-year-old, formerly ultra-Orthodox resident of Modi'in Illit, who supposedly crossed into Syrian territory by mistake before her arrest. The Syrian prisoners, meantime, include Nihal al-Makht and Diab Kamuz, both of whom come from families that oppose Israeli rule over the Golan. Israel captured the Golan in the Six-Day War of 1967 and formally annexed it in 1981. Many residents still consider themselves Syrian and retain Syrian citizenship. But al-Makht was indicted for incitement in 2017, served 3 years in prison, and was released to house arrest. She will likely now be allowed to stay in the Israeli Golan in her home, a free woman. Kamuz, on the other hand, was sentenced to 16 years in prison in 2018 for plotting a bombing on behalf of Hezbollah, and Qamouz's father and 5 other accomplices were also arrested with links to the Iranian terror proxy. So it's not yet clear whether he'll be released to Syria or allowed to return to his village in the Golan.
Israel held a surprise military drill on its northern border this week with a stern message for Hezbollah. The exercise, which ended on Tuesday, tested the Israel Air Force's ability to strike 3,000 targets in Lebanon within just 24 hours.
זה תרגיל רחב מאוד. התרחיש שממנו התחיל התרגיל הזה זה ירי מהקרקע של חיזבאללה לעבר כטמ"ם ישראלי. חיל האוויר נערך לתגובה ובהמשך בוצע עוד ירי לעבר כלי טיס נוסף. אנחנו כחיל דואגים לשמור על העליונות האווירית ואנחנו לא נוכל לקבל ירי של מערכות נשק לעבר כלי טיס בזירה שבה אנחנו פועלים. ובעצם בתרגיל הזה אנחנו מתרגלים את הפעולות של כל החיל למעבר לחירום, להתמודדות עם איומים כאלו.
Following that exercise, Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah responding to the drill, saying, after all the recent threats from Israel, no one can guarantee that it won't lead to war. Israel will see things it hasn't seen since its inception.
Now, in other news, a plan to provide Israeli natural gas to the Gaza Strip is finally nearing approval. For more than a decade, Gaza has been suffering from a chronic electricity deficit with daily blackouts stretching between 8 to 12 hours long. Talks of a natural gas pipeline then have been in the works for years, but only now may actually happen. The European Union allocating $5 million to pay for part of the pipeline, while Qatar is promising to pay for the rest. However, no agreement has been officially signed between the parties, including Israel, the European Union, Qatar, and the Palestinian Authority. The agreement is expected to be finalized within the next 6 months. More on the gas pipeline for Gaza is President of the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, Dr. Ephraim Inbar. Dr. Inbar, thank you so much for being with us. Now, why did this plan take so long to get to this point?
Well, it's difficult to negotiate between Hamas and Israel. And even Qatari money, which usually oils some of the processes, it took its time.
So then how will the newly proposed system work as opposed to the current system?
Well, currently the energy needs of Gaza are taken care of by kerosene, gasoline, and a little bit from Egypt. And now they will be able to get gas via pipeline from Israel. This will considerably lower the price of electricity in Gaza. Moreover, it will allow the Gazans to divert some energy to a desalination plant, as well as to a waste treatment plant, which will clear some of the pollution that comes from Gaza.
So would this solve Gaza's energy problem?
I'm not sure it will solve all energy problems, but it will definitely ease the life of the Gazans. And after all, Israel is not interested in having hungry and desperate neighbors. It will also become a leverage, a greater leverage Israel has on Gaza. But it depends, of course, if we will be ready to use it when we would like to push Hamas into more constructive ways. It will, of course, strengthen the rule of Hamas and inadvertently also the role of Qatar and Turkey in the region.
So that actually brings me to my final question. What are Israel's concerns and how are they being addressed in this deal?
I think that we want some kind of long-term ceasefire, and maybe this will contribute to a longer ceasefire as the Gazans will be more dependent upon Israel in a very important strategic area, the area of energy.
All right, Dr. Ephraim Inbar, thank you so much for your insights. Truly, I appreciate it. And I hope to have you back when we learn more about this deal and hopefully when it's approved soon. Dr. Inbar, thank you again.
At your service. Bye.
In other news, the Israel Health Ministry is drafting legislation that would compel workers in, quote, essential professions to get vaccinated against coronavirus or provide negative COVID tests before entering certain premises. And the bill primarily is targeting educators, police officers, and medical personnel. But already, government officials are running into many logistical and legal obstacles. In fact, Health Minister Yuli Edelstein's first proposed such legislation back in November 2020, but was blocked due to legal difficulties. Still, with nearly 52,800 Israelis actively infected, 928 of whom are in serious condition, health authorities are largely ignoring concerns that the draft law might violate civil rights, while insisting that the legislation is actually needed to protect public health. And this in addition to the Green Passport program, by which vaccinated Israelis will have more access to public amenities than the unvaccinated, which brings us now to the next issue, a black market for counterfeit vaccination certificates that's already large and growing larger, with cybersecurity experts claiming that the digital passes are all too easy to replicate. And that, just on Telegram alone, over 100,000 users have already joined groups that offer forgeries. In related news, Israeli health ministry authorities are calling on hospitals to brace for a wave of children infected by coronavirus. This is the UK variant of the virus, which accounts for over 80% of infections in Israel today, is increasingly infecting unvaccinated children, especially as schools continue to reopen. Meanwhile, at least 30 children under age 18 are already hospitalized with coronavirus, including 3 young children in serious condition and a 14-year-old boy in critical condition despite having recovered from COVID once before. And then perhaps worst of all, a fetus dying from COVID-19 for the first time in the country this week after the mother was hospitalized with COVID-19 during her 25th week in pregnancy and was made to undergo a silent birth. While tragic and scary, though, these numbers aren't all that unexpected. Most of the 50-plus age group has already now been vaccinated, and already the vast majority of new infections are being reported among the under 40 age group. And now we're over a year into the coronavirus pandemic, and if there's one thing that the world is learning the hard way, it's that a new global framework for dealing with infectious diseases must be drafted, especially as the spread of the disease as the spread of a disease just as deadly or deadlier is a matter of time away. And the world seems to be looking at Israel now for many of the answers. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday pushing for world powers to come together on a global pandemic treaty. This in order to ensure the transparency necessary to better understand the current COVID-19 pandemic and to hopefully prevent the next zoonotic crisis.
Alistair, I think what the world needs to see is a general agreement on how we track data surrounding zoonotic pandemics. We want zoonotic research hubs around the world, and we want a general agreement on transparency.
But meanwhile, Israel's already working with global partners to bring the pandemic to an end, and world leaders are taking note. The UK's chief medical officer, Chris Whitty, for one, looking to Israel as a case study for guiding virus policy. Likewise, international media outlets are praising Israel's outcomes, such as reducing infections among the vaccinated to well below 1%. The BBC and CNN, among others, for example, writing that the Israeli campaign shows that the vaccines are performing just as well in larger populations as they did in clinical trials. Israel leading the world for vaccinations per capita, having already given nearly 4 million people one of the 2 vaccine doses and nearly 2.6 million people both. Additionally, Israel has been towards the front in developing treatments and other virus-related advancements in partnership with other nations. For example, the new cooperation between Greek and Israeli hospitals in testing a new treatment for those already infected with COVID-19. And similarly, Prime Minister Netanyahu announcing partnerships with Colombia, the UAE, the United States, the Netherlands, and more, including most recently pending negotiations to build 2 vaccine production plants in Israel for Moderna and Pfizer. The plan being to turn Israel into a global vaccine manufacturing center for the world. All right, coming judo and soccer tournaments aside then, Israeli officials engaging in a decidedly more serious competition against the growing anti-vaxxer campaign in the country.
השבוע אנחנו נגיע ל4 מיליון מתחסנים, זה מספר אדיר, אבל אנחנו צריכים להגיע מהר מאוד, ל5 מיליון מתחסנים, ובכך אנחנו מנצחים סופית את המוטציה.
Another landmark. Over 3.9 million Israelis inoculated against COVID-19 to date, 2.5 million of whom have already received both shots of the Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna RNA vaccine. But a powerful wave of misinformation is seemingly still growing, threatening all of the progress achieved by Israel's rollout. And it's not just online. For example, the Israel Beitenu party claiming that we don't know anything about the vaccine, While rabbis like Yuval HaKohen Ashraf, who has no medical background, is saying that the vaccine can be fatal and cause infertility or severe allergies. The Health and Justice Ministry is responding then by launching a revitalized campaign to right the ship, including a digital task force with an enlarged budget to counter deceitful messages online. And that's not all.
אנחנו נביא לממשלה חקיקת בזק שתאפשר לשלטון המקומי לקבל את הנתונים על אלה שלא התחסנו ובכך לעודד אותם להתחסן, להציל חיים. ואני קורא גם לצעירים מביניכם. אני קורא לכם לעודד את ההורים שלכם ואת הסבים והסבתות שלכם ללכת להתחסן. אתם יכולים להציל רבים מהם, להציל אותם ממחלה קשה או חלילה ממוות. ולכו גם להתחסן בעצמכם.
Meanwhile, taking a carrot and stick approach, authorities outlining the benefits vaccinated Israelis will enjoy, including being able to go to stores, malls, gyms, hotels, houses of worship, and more by as soon as this Sunday, pending a final decision in the cabinet. Again, though, putting the economic and social benefits aside, the benefits of vaccination for our health also far outweigh the risks. The latest reports released Sunday showing the Pfizer vaccine, for one, to be between 91 and 99% efficient in reducing infection and preventing the virus from evolving into a serious illness.
The United States is accusing Israel of double standard when it comes to flight exceptions, as most of the world's skies are closed to travel. Israel has organized emergency rescue flights through its El Al airline to bring Israelis home who are stranded abroad in light of COVID. Now the U.S. calling it unfair, saying that if Israeli airplanes are permitted to land in the U.S., the same should be true for American planes in Israel. The U.S. Department of Transportation reportedly complained to Israel's Foreign Ministry and Transportation Ministry, saying that this situation violates an aviation agreement between the countries, which was meant to guarantee equal treatment of Israeli and American airlines. A 6-year-old Ethiopian boy will now be able to get life-saving heart surgery in Israel. Here is Binyamin Tasfun exiting an airplane at Ben Gurion Airport with Aliyah and Integration Minister Pnino Tamano-Shata. The boy has a congenital heart defect and requires life-saving surgery. Thanks to member of Knesset Tzachi Hanegbi, the Save a Child's Heart Foundation, and Wolfson Medical Center, the boy was able to come to Israel along with 330 new immigrants from Ethiopia who landed at Ben Gurion Airport on Friday as part of Operation Rock of Israel. His flight had originally been postponed due to COVID, but a viral tweet got Binyamin a spot on this weekend's flight, unfortunately without his mother, who the Foreign Ministry has promised will be able to join him soon.
Now, among the new plans to reopen the economy from COVID-19 lockdowns, Israeli athletics authorities are offering to host major international tournaments. The Israeli Football Association, for one, having already reached out to the UEFA in hopes of hosting several Champions League and Euro 2020 League soccer matches this summer. And given Israel's vaccine success story, leagues are seriously considering the offer. But meanwhile, having already chosen Israel as the safest site to compete, the world's annual judo Grand Slam competition is slated to begin this week in Tel Aviv, with the star of the competition being none other than exiled world champion Iranian judoka Saeed Moulai. Saeed Moulai, who under the threat of Iranian retribution, famously and reluctantly threw his fights in 2018 to avoid facing off against Israeli opponent Sagi Muki. But Moulai then fled Iran in 2019, became close friends with Muki, and will instead be representing Mongolia in the coming Olympics. Of course, nothing without its problems as well. Critics are accusing Israel of selectively okaying international arrivals for sports, while hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis are still trapped abroad due to travel restrictions under COVID lockdown.
Okay, a Kuwaiti singer and actress, Ibtisam Hamid, known by her stage name Basma al-Kuwaiti, sent shockwaves through the Arab world when she announced last week that she intends to renounce Islam and convert to Judaism. In a video she posted on Twitter, Hamid said that her decision stemmed from the fact that Islam violates women's rights and does not treat them with dignity. She spoke to Ynet this morning in an exclusive interview about her decision to change her religion and how it was inspired by Israeli music.
I felt that a few months, it's starting when I heard, Amra Adam, and, when I understand what they said in the songs, I like it. And I'm starting by the songs, I look for the religion, and I like it.
The singer also spoke about the threats to her life and her conviction to be whoever she wants.
you know, the people, they are angry from me, and also they threaten me, you know, to kill me. And I know that it will be, this happened, you know. So it is my conviction, what I want to be. I think it's what I get, or I change my religion. It's up to me, not to another people.
All right, it's the latest milestone in the historic Abraham Peace Accords. Israel's ambassador to the UAE, Eitan Naeh, already sitting in the Israeli embassy in Abu Dhabi. And now the United Arab Emirates on Sunday swearing in its first ambassador to Israel, Mohammed Mahmoud Al-Khaja. However, due to the pandemic, it remains unclear when Al-Khaja will arrive in Israel to take up his post in Tel Aviv at the new Emirati embassy. Likewise, a visa waiver agreement between Israel and the UAE has been held up, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is postponing an impending trip to the Gulf with no future date yet announced. In the meantime, Jewish groups in the Gulf are also now announcing new ties, also made possible by the Abraham Accords. Communities in Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE announcing the formation of the Association of Gulf Jewish Communities, or the AGJC, which will include its own rabbi and Jewish court, aka the Beit Din of Arabia. And it'll also be responsible for presiding over kosher food certifications, civil disputes, personal status changes, and other such issues in the Persian Gulf, all in accordance with Jewish law.
Okay, green passports might seem like the hot topic at every water cooler or Zoom meetup, but it's hard to imagine cultural events coming back after such a long hiatus. Well, the Jerusalem municipality is planning its first event of 2021, a light show. The city will be illuminating and transforming iconic landmarks into works of art. Until the day when tourists can breeze through the streets of Jerusalem once again, the Jerusalem Follow the Lights interactive experience will also be available to viewers at home as if they were there. The event will kick off on Sunday, February 21st.
And that's it for ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next week.